Hello, Billy.
Hey, JR, how you
You
doing?
pretty good. You and Jackie are early. I love it.
Yeah, well, I was either going to be early or get distracted and be late, so you must know how that is.
I never happens to me at all.
Ha, liar. So what
Um,
you up to? I don't hear much from you.
well, I have been out of the state for about the last 4 weeks. No, actually, since December. My
Mm.
son is in Nebraska, uh, and um, and he's been having some issues with some PTSD.
Oh,
So I've been there trying to support him and help him. Um, and things are looking up, but it's a very slow process.
was he in the armed forces?
No, no, some personal things
Mm.
like tragedies of friends that you witness, just being in the wrong spot at the wrong time. So I've learned a lot about that. Uh, and I learned a lot about what hotspots are, how the advantage of them from my telephone. So I was really connected. And there's a 2 hour time zone change. So I was, as long as I was willing to get up, I had a lot of time to catch up on writing emails and memos and stuff like that.
2 hours? Isn't it
Yeah.
central? Isn't Nebraska central?
The eastern part of Nebraska is, the western part is not. It's
It's
in mountain
mountain?
time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Are there
Yeah.
mountains in Nebraska?
I was in the Panhandle, which does have some mountains, and it's about an hour away from the Black Hills of South Dakota, where
Ooh.
Mount Rushmore is. I'd never been there, so
And you didn't
pretty
go while you were there? Oh, too bad.
didn't get to that. But there are mountains there, and it's a quite picturesque part of the country.
I always think of Nebraska as being so flat, and only flat, but it's good to know. Yeah, I was learning something.
Yeah, parts of it were, and lots of cornfields and lots of agriculture. Yeah,
Yeah, known for its corn.
you bet. And I got to witness for the first time minus 22 degrees and 40-mile-an-hour straight line winds.
How is that? Do you have
It
some
was
PTSD now?
it was not, and a it wasn't a cold climate, but just a air source heat pump, which did not work at all.
Mm.
It ran 24/7 for a week, and I thought, oh, please don't break down.
And
There
you
was
didn't see any Geo that mastered it, huh?
there. I didn't see anybody with Geo. We were pretty isolated, but
So this
uh,
is what happens to them. They're running on basically the what they call the toaster strips.
yeah,
I guess it's cheap enough. No, Nebraska has its own public power. You know that? The whole state is a public power
I
authority.
did. I didn't know that. Did not
Yeah,
know that.
I'm learning about public authorities because of LIPA.
Oh, okay.
You know,
Yeah,
people
I'm
are making it
assuming.
sound like, yeah, sorry, go on.
I was going to say I haven't seen the bill they got, nor do I think I want to.
Oh, I'd be real curious. It still might be pretty reasonable because it's a consumer owned utility, a COU. And
Oh,
that's technically what LIPA is, only the has the that subcontractor that is a utility investor owned utility. I like that in the acronym. It's IOU,
yeah.
investor owned utility. I think that's perfect. But yeah, I'm learning about that because they make it sound like what we're trying to do with LIPA to have it functions the way it originally was supposed to is weird and different and experimental. And what is experimental is the model we have now. And gee, it's working so well. Everyone's wanting to do the same thing. Not.
Uh-huh. Well, that's kind of like the banks and the credit unions, right? Uh, Credit unions are nonprofit and they're to serve. Well, they say serve the customer. I'm sure the banks will say the same thing.
Yeah. But they serve the investors. And the
Exactly.
investors in a credit union are the owner or the account holders. It's a little different with when it comes to LIPA, because what we have is we have an investor-owned utility running the grid. So even though LIPA itself is not for profit, it's got a for-profit subcontractor.
Yeah, I thought they got rid of PSEC.
Oh, no. The contract ends December 31st, 2025, and they set up a commission to set up how LIPA would run it himself, and it kind of a feasibility study, but let's see what we can come up with. But no, that has not been approved yet. And in fact, there's no Senate sponsor for it. It's only an assembly sponsor.
Oh, I see.
And we're having trouble because the senator who was a co-chair of the whole commission is now running for Congress, and he sort of seems to have forgotten his responsibilities to the state and to the people of it, who voted for him. So it's very frustrating.
I see.
And the one who started it didn't get reelected. It was my state senator didn't get reelected in the last cycle.
Who was that?
Jim Gorin.
Oh, I see.
So that hurt the process because he was really gung-ho, and so was the assembly co-chair.
So they were trying to get rid of PSEG, not TRC, right?
Well, we don't know what's, they may just take over the contract with TRC, but, but I'm sure that they would be brought in either as consultants or as LIPA actual employees. John Franciscina used to be a LIPA employee,
right,
until they redid things in 2013, and PSEG wanted to take over more responsibility. And they actually started billing, so people would see PSEG, and a lot of people thought they had bought LIPA out. But they took over billing, whereas before LIPA had done the billing. So it's very strange. People don't know what's going on because of that. And all the trucks now say PSEG. It used to be they said LIPA, even though they were run by National Grid. It's crazy.
Okay, that's a head spinner.
Yeah, sorry about that. I should have done that at the end when your head was already spinning.
No, that's okay. Hi, Jerry, Colin, Bob. Good to see you.
Hey, guys. And Bill?
Bill, good afternoon.
Hey, everyone.
How you doing, everybody?
Pretty good from this standpoint. Bob, quick note, I haven't responded to your text. I'm still looking for that recording. Sorry, I haven't been quicker.
Okay, thanks for looking.
Yep. It's 3:01. I guess we'll give it a couple more minutes so we can continue our social hour here. If anybody has any interesting news.
I got my first bill on the voluntary time of use meter that I mentioned.
Okay.
I'm overall saving about 14%. But well, I will be saving 14%. The kilowatt hours that were billed on the new meter, because this bill was about half old and half new.
Oh.
And part of the reason it's not more is that there's a couple of charges, like the ESRM and things like that apply to your kilowatt hours but have nothing to do with your how you're metered. And the ESRM is supposed to kind of go up and down. And I looked back at all my bills, and all it's ever done is like it's supposed to be negative in the coldest months, and then positive in the milder months. It's supposed to smooth out your bills a little, I guess, is the point. But all I've had are positive charges for the last 9 months. So I think they're doing something not quite altogether right there. And it's sort of mitigating how much I'm saving, but I am saving 14%. So, savings are savings.
And you're up in the Albany area, is that
National Grid? Yeah.
National Grid? Okay.
And I realize I've got a confounding factor in my savings is because we had such high power supply charges over a year ago. And
Hmm.
that may be confounding my results, why I'm paying less for more kilowatts, because the per kilowatt cost has changed.
Jackie, what's the SRM?
The ESRM is let me look up what that stands for. Enterprise Security Risk Management. So it's kind of a lot of words to. It was proposed by the utility a while back to change how they, they buy power and then they kind of are guessing what it's going to cost after they buy it for the next month, for the following month. And if they charge people more than if they guessed higher than what they actually paid, they're supposed to give you a credit. And if they guess lower than what they paid, then they get to charge you more next month to make up for the difference. But my guess is that they are kind of fudging the numbers because it seems unlikely that they're continuously guessing low for almost a year straight. Something isn't right. But there's been a lot of back and forth between the lawmakers and the utilities about this charge. Some months it's substantial. Some months it's almost 10% of my bill. So I'm kind of hoping, or 10% of my delivery charges, sorry. I'm kind of hoping they get that figured out, because my little voice alone isn't going to mean anything, but I'm sure it's distorting the savings that I could actually be getting with the voluntary time of use meter, because it's not your time of use is not affecting this extra charge.
Right, but that's a hedging fee. That's a supply charge, not a delivery charge.
Well, yeah, sorry, supply, yeah. I got them backwards. But yeah, that's it's supposed to ideally it's flat. They're supposed to guess correctly. And I'm thinking that something's not altogether right, because it seems mine has been positive. They've been charging me extra for almost a year straight, and that just seems very unlikely that they're just guessing low every month. But anyway, that's not directly related to Geo. That's just my little complaint about how I should be saving more because of my Geo and voluntary time of use, but due to some tricky numbers that they're pulling, it seems like it's not as much as I should be getting.
That sounds like about a 2-hour conversation to the customer service person, unfortunately.
Oh, yes.
If they're anything like my utility. So, okay, folks, well, welcome aboard on Friday. We'll get started. Today is pretty much an open forum. We don't have a planned program. Next week we do, and I encourage anybody who has any interest in getting their local schools electrified, tune in. We've got Hannah Morgan from NYSERDA, who's going to talk about the incentives, the rebates on schools going to geothermal. So I know we'll have the New Paltz school system, because I spoke to the education board Tuesday and invited them. They are about to pass a bond package and hopefully are interested enough to implement some geothermal. So if your school board is looking at saving money and et cetera, have them tune in, please. What I'd like to do first is see what topics you want to talk about. I got my pen ready, and then let's see if everybody knows everyone else on the call. So fire away if you have any topics of interest.
New York State tax credit expansion.
Okay. And I think we've got the right guy on the phone, or on the call to do that. Bill, you can get ready. I'm going to I'm going to pass it to you. Other topics? Okay. Bob, can I impose on you maybe to think about just a brief update on today's SC1 rate 4?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, super.
I actually have, if anybody has heard about the HERA rebates, HEERA, it was part of the 2022 package that was passed. And apparently word on the street right now is that they will be in place at the end of this year or the beginning of next. But I have some customers who are asking me if I know anything more. So I figured this would be a good place to see if anybody's heard anything else about that.
Okay. Well, that's three things we can tee up, and like always, if you have something that you think about during the session here, feel free to jump in or raise your hand and I'll make sure that you get it verbalized. So Jeannie, welcome to our show. I think you've been here before. And Scott, I think you've been here before as well, but is there anybody that doesn't know anyone else, or should we just go through introductions? Give me some feedback.
I always appreciate introductions.
Okay, great. Then I'm going to start since we've got some time. John Rath, otherwise known as JR, and I'm Director of Operations for NY-GEO, which means I get involved in rate cases and other proceedings with the utilities. I do some customer or member relations, advocacy work with our allies such as Agree and Renewable Heat Now, and whatever else Bill and the board needs me to do. So I'll be tabulating the responses we got for our geothermal tax credit, that people that called in or wrote in over the weekend, and give a report back to Bill next week. Okay, I'm just going to call out names. Billy.
Hi, hi everyone. Billy Roberti. I'm the founder, president, and CEO of Green Choices Consulting. I'm a founding member of NY-GEO. And I have a geothermal heat pump for heating and for clothes drying, and solar, some solar on the roof.
Terrific. Ron.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ron Kamen with Earthkind Energy Consulting. Pleasure seeing everybody. And we're a boutique clean energy consulting firm. We represent primarily commercial customers, but some larger residential ones as well, in clean energy transformations that reduce cost, access incentives, and lower carbon footprints. That's everything from efficiency through solar or off the roof, heat pumps, air and ground source, primarily geothermal, but still some places for those air source heat pumps, and electric vehicles and charging stations. So Ron Kamen, Earthkind Energy Consulting, go clean, save green, and also the awesome Earthkind podcast. Thanks, Chuck.
Love that voice, Ron. I love it. Gene, you're up next.
Hey everybody, I'm Jean Bergman. I am a consultant to Sane Energy and a pro bono advisor to Sane. And we've mostly worked on eliminating the fracked gas infrastructure and increasingly opposing renewable natural gas, where it is used as a sort of stalking horse to keep fracked gas in business. But in order to really eliminate fracked gas, we've decided that district geo is the key. And that's also a really important way to prevent low-income people from being stuck with higher costs due to stranded assets. So we are all about thermal energy networks and district geo now. And I'll pass it to Jerry.
Hi there, everybody. Jerry Wiley. I'm an energy navigator, trying to up my skills with Rewiring America. And shall I choose the next person? Bob
Yeah,
Wyman?
sure.
Bob?
Oh, okay. Hi. Yeah, Bob Wyman here, ex-New Yorker, now living in Washington, D.C. Independent. I don't work with any groups. I'm an NY-GEO member. At least I need to renew my membership probably. I participate in a lot of rate cases and generally harass people about geo and gas-related issues.
You sure do, Bob. And it's fun. It's fun to be on those calls. Colin, how about you?
Hey everyone, Colin Rojas, PM for ConEdison, commercial multifamily geothermal. We will have a program manual update 1st of March, so look out for that. That should be interesting. Other than that, try and generate more geothermal projects here in Con Ed's service territory, particularly larger projects, commercial, large multifamily, stuff like that.
Uh-oh,
So,
Kyla, we want to hear about the March 1st thing. Some of us have projects on the edge, so we want to know whether we need to push them over or what, if you would. So,
I can't speak to it right now, but stay tuned. How's that?
you might have just got yourself a slot on one of our next Let's Talk Fridays, Colin.
We're happy to talk through it once it's out there, once it's on the street.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay, Jackie.
I'm Jackie Shear. I geothermal heat pump designer, and most of what I do is homeowners that want to do a DIY geothermal installation. For them, I do a certain amount of remote project management as well, light project management, just so they can get things settled. They do all the work, and, the physical labor, which is just fine by me. And I also do some contractors that want to do geothermal, but they don't want to, get in trouble due to their lack of experience with, the unique design aspects. Yeah, New York Geo member, and really excited about how Geo's getting pushed in the state and federal governments.
Terrific. Scott, you're up next. Okay.
If I can unmute myself, that
Oh.
would be good. Okay, there we go. Hey, how you doing? Scott up in Concord Engineering. We're an MEP FP consulting firm. We do geothermal throughout the United States, predominantly in the Northeast.
Great. Thanks for joining us. And our board member, Bill Nowak.
Hi, I'm Bill, former executive director of New-York-GEO, current board member.
What have you shared with us in the chat, Bill?
Well, if we want to get to the bill, is it
Okay.
time to talk about that?
Yeah, you're right. Number one.
Okay. And as I mentioned earlier in the chat, I may need to bug out with some immediacy at some point. But so we have a bill that is sponsored by Senator Kennedy in the Senate, Assemblymember Rivera in the Assembly. It would make the cap on the geothermal tax credit for residential installations not $5,000 but $10,000. Currently, there's a geothermal tax credit of 25%, but it is capped at $5,000. It would also make it refundable. And we've been working really hard to get this in this year's budget. Today, we got a support memo from New Yorkers for Clean Power. We are up to 22 co-sponsors in the Assembly. And in the Senate, we've been working closely with Senator Kennedy's office. They're not as worried about getting co-sponsors, and they are fairly confident about getting it in the Senate one House bill. The idea is to get it into the Assembly one House bill as well. for folks who don't know the process, basically, the governor put forth her budget back in January. It did not include this bill, but the Senate and the Assembly will be putting out their one house budgets. It's scheduled for March 12th or probably March 12th. And then there will be negotiations between those three bodies. We met with the governor's office this last week. They were generally positive and friendly about it, made no commitments, but they're looking to get engaged with it in the negotiating process. So we have done a number of emails. We've gotten up to 500 total emails to the governor and the legislators. I imagine everyone on this call who is eligible and not prohibited by their job or whatever has already done an email. If you haven't, please send me an email and I'll send you the instructions. But what I put in today is a request for folks to call their legislators and the governor. It's an easy peasy thing to do. Nobody fights with you when you call in on these items. And it's just kind of registering your voice. So there is a couple links at the bottom of my chat that show you where to find out who your senator and assembly member is and how to get their phone numbers. And if everybody on this call who can would do a call over this next week to those three bodies, it would be great. While I've got everybody here, you know, we've been working really hard on New York Heat as well. And New York Heat needs a big push, particularly in Western New York, where there is a gas company that doesn't have electric service and we'll lose it all if we do away with gas. So they've been very aggressive. They've been doing robocalls. They've weakened the Western New York delegation's interest and support for New York Heat. You know, anybody you listen to will say that if there's opposition in either the Senate or the Assembly, it's coming from Western New York. So with the Sierra Club, we did a bunch of phone calls to their list last night, urging people to counteract the barrage of calls people are getting from fossil fuel interests in Western New York. And you don't need to be from Western New York to make these calls. It's mainly leaving messages because people don't pick up their phones anymore unless they recognize the number. But I've got a really nice, easy message that I was leaving that I think is going to be helpful. And if anybody would like to help us on that, you can do it at your own time. We're also doing it Monday at noon. And there you'll get an explanation of how the calling program works. And it'd be great if any of you would help with that as well.
Thanks, Bill. Appreciate it. Anybody with questions on Bill's piece? And Jean, you looks like you've got something that's somewhat related in terms of advocacy. So why don't you go ahead?
All right, I'll be brief. It is somewhat related in that one of the problems we have on everything we try to do is that the utilities and other fossil fuel interests meet everything we attempt with a barrage of false information and marketing and lobbying and lies. And so Assemblymember Solage from Long Island has a bill that would prohibit the utilities, the investor-owned utilities, from using customer money to lobby, and we're hoping to expand it to include a couple of, disinformation and marketing. And a group of us, it's now about 8 organizations, and we're hoping to expand that a lot, are pulling together just a very simple 1-hour kind of educational meeting, Zoom, about this in March. And then we're going to have a forum with Assemblymember Solage in April after the budget, God willing, is settled. So if you are interested, whatever your organization is, please just send me an email. I'll put my contact information in the chat and let me know if your organization would like to join as a host or let's call it a co-sponsor, that you're able to endorse this effort. Thank you. That's all.
Jean, do you have any bill numbers for that?
You know, I do, but I don't have them on my fingertips. I will put them in the stack. I mean, in the chat.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gene. Not a moment too soon for something like that.
It's been done in several states. Maine, a couple other states have already done it. Illinois is about to do it. So I think it's really going to start happening.
Okay, thank you. So Bob, you're up for SC1 rate 4. Maybe if you can give folks a little bit of intro to it, and maybe Colin even has some support comments, but don't feel obligated, Colin. I just know you're from ConEd. And
Yeah, I couldn't possibly speak to rate cases. I'm not involved in them.
okay, thanks. So Bob, go ahead.
Okay. I think hopefully everybody's familiar with what SC4 is, or R4 is. We've talked about this before, but basically, look, well, let's start with history. In about, I've got these great journal articles from, I think it's 1881 or 82, where in England they're talking about how are they going to charge for electricity, and because at the time it was a new problem, and basically they come to the conclusion that the way they should charge is according, for at least delivery charges, is according to demand. But unfortunately, that requires fancy meters. So instead, they say, okay, well, the best we can do is charge volumetrically by kilowatt hour until we get better and cheaper meters. Well, we've essentially, from the beginning of the electricity industry, it's been known that you should not be charging for delivery volumetrically by kilowatt hour. You should be charging by demand according to kW. The thing that's changed is that we now have fancy meters. So anyway, in the rate case in actually the last couple rate cases in New York City, we talked ConEd into creating this SC1, that's the residential service class, and R4, which is a demand-based rate, which essentially charges you for your delivery bill. Then is not based on how many kilowatt hours you consume, but rather it's the average of your basically it's an approximation of your peak load in terms of kW during the month. And the reason for arguing for this is that when you bill for delivery using that method, basically average kW peak as opposed to kWh, what you're doing is you are more equitably distributing the costs, because the charges are based on the actual costs of delivering, of paying for all the equipment that delivers electricity, which is what delivery is supposed to do. The expectation was as well that if you have a demand-based rate, that will essentially reward people who have what are called high load factors. And by the load factor is essentially a measure between 0 and 1 of how smooth your electric demand is over the period. If basically you're absolutely flat, you always consumed exactly the same amount of kilowatt hours, every moment of the day, you'd have a load factor of 1. If you consumed all of your electricity in some tremendous burst, say during the 1 hour of the day, and then you did nothing for the rest of the day, you'd have a much lower, your load factor would get below 0.1 or something like that. It would begin to approximate to 0. So anyway, so we have this rate. It was designed, basically it was Bill Axtell and me got together and did this a couple rate cases in the past. And the idea was that if, in fact, cost of electric delivery was more equitably distributed, that would provide a significant benefit to ground source heat pump owners. And that is in fact what the assessment that ConEd had a presentation on this morning confirms. They confirm that based on a small sample, but nonetheless based on all the systems that they seemed able to find, about 89 to 90% of all geothermal users should see a reduced electric rate. And for those who do see that reduced electric rate, it should be about $103 per month over the year. The average monthly savings over the year would be about $103. The same rate will also benefit air source heat pump users, but their benefit will be lower. They will only essentially have a savings of about $41 over what they would have had, over what they would have paid if they were on the normal SC1-R1 or rate 1. Let's see, they also confirmed that if you've got an electric vehicle or you have photovoltaic panels, this rate will probably not benefit you. And the reasons there should be obvious. When you charge an electric vehicle, you are putting a tremendous amount of load on the system. Your kWh, your kW peak, your demand peak goes up dramatically just during the period when you're charging the car, and then of course it falls off to like normal rates throughout the day. So if you have an electric vehicle, then you probably have a low load factor. And then with photovoltaic, the thing about photovoltaic is that if you use that technology, you're getting compensated not only because of net metering, you're getting back for every kilowatt hour you produce, you're getting back not only the cost of delivery, but also the cost of supply. So it's quite a significant discount to you. And it has very screwy impacts on what your actual sort of peak demand is. Anyway, the conclusion there was that only a tiny number of photovoltaic customers would benefit from this rate. So the important thing about it, I think, is and then one of the things that was surprising was that they discovered that actually about 60% of customers who are just sort of random customers who have neither electric vehicles, air source, ground source, or photovoltaic, about 60% of customers would benefit from this rate, simply because for one reason or another they are high load factor customers. They don't have a lot of peaking uses. The reason the assessment was asked for, unfortunately, really didn't get addressed in the assessment, and that was to see if there was something that could be done to the design of this rate to make it more desirable to people who either had electric vehicles or photovoltaic. They did not address that issue. They simply confirmed that, yep, if you got an EV or PV, you probably don't want to be on R4. But I think their data pretty much definitively makes the case. If you've got a geothermal heat pump, you want to be on, and you're in the ConEd area, and this rate is available to you, you want to be on R4. You're going to be saving a lot of money if you switch to it, and you're just basically subsidizing people that use fossil fuels if you stick with the old rate. Now, in terms of the subsidy, some of the people may remember that we had a number of studies in the past, including those done by, I did one, and NYSERDA, of course, did a much more thorough one where they were showing that, say, in the Con Ed area, if I remember right, their estimate was that a geothermal user in the Con Ed area was essentially paying somewhere on the order of $800 more per year than their fair share for the cost of the electric system. Essentially, you know, SC4 is intended to return to the geothermal users that money. And it turns out that, as I said, with an average of $103 a month, it's going to it'll turn back. It'll give back to the geothermal users. Certainly, the $800 that NYSERDA estimated, and the actual savings is probably closer to what NYSERDA should have estimated. Anyway, my hope is that more people will use this rate. We'll get a report, I think they said on March, on how many people are on it at the moment and how they break down into the different categories: ground source, air source, sort of technology, non-technology users. We'll get a number of that, and they've also said that they expect to do more to publicize this rate in the future. One of the things they're working on now, and they've been working on for a long time, is essentially a rate comparison tool. So if you've got AMI, and not most Con Ed customers do have AMI, you'll essentially be able to go in and ask the question: if I had been on R4 for the last year or two, would I have saved money? And you know, we would expect somewhere around 60% of all customers, 80 to 90%, 90% of all geothermal customers, et cetera, will end up having that tool tell them, yes, you would have saved money by switching to R4. Anyway, I hope the industry, at least that part of the industry that serves the Con Ed territory, I hope they put a lot of effort into telling people about R4, because it's in addition to all the other incentives, because this is not, R4 is not an incentive. R4 is an attempt to equitably allocate the costs of electric service. So it is not an incentive. But when you take the savings from using R4 and you add that onto the other incentives, it's unfathomable to me why anybody who had the legal ability to get a geothermal heat pump, that means they're not an apartment dweller, if they had the ability to get a geothermal heat pump, why they wouldn't do it is just beyond my fathoming. So that's all.
Thanks, Bob. Appreciate it. Does anybody have questions? I see Gene's got one. And then, oh, sorry, Ron, you've been having your hand up. Go ahead, Ron.
Thanks. So, Bob, you know, in traditional demand rates, it's the peak for any 15-minute period for the month. How does the average work, and what happens, like, you know, I mean, if you have a peak during the peak time for the utility during the middle of the day versus night, how does that all work?
Yeah, right. Okay, there are two periods. There's a peak and an off peak, and they're where you would expect them to be. Basically, off peak is weekends and night. Peak is during the afternoon. And what you do, and this is sort of an odd system. Tradition. Let me just say first why you're probably asking the question. Commercial users are typically all on demand rates today. And they get very unhappy with it because they do in fact get billed for, you know, their peak demand during whatever single 15-minute period of the month it was, which means that somebody can do something silly like, you know, run a machine at an abnormal rate, or just whatever. You can generate a very high peak, which is very unrepresentative of your demand throughout the month, but you end up having to pay for that one 15-minute peak, as though you had been using electricity at that rate, that intensity throughout the month. It also tends for the commercial customers to produce a lot of variability in their bills. The bills jump up and down depending on sort of what was their worst 15-minute slice for the month. That's not the case here. What we do here is, first of all, there are the two periods, and what you do is you take for the month, for each of the two periods, you determine what are the 3 1-hour periods where you had the highest demand, and then you average those. Okay. The idea being that you may have, say, for a home, you might have done something silly like left a window open, or you had a party or something so you had a tremendous heating or cooling demand. And the fact that your peaks are essentially averaged over, the three highest peaks of the month, that tends to bring the peak down. And
does it matter whether it's during the peak period or if you did it off peak? Those 3 highest periods?
No, because you get two peaks. You get your off peak and you get your on peak. Okay, so
Okay,
you end
thanks.
up actually averaging 6 peaks, but in groups of 3. Okay.
Got it. Thank you.
Gene's asking if you got something written on this, Bob. We're recording this, Gene, by the way, so if that's helpful, it's always good to get Bob on record. Good reference. But Bob, I noted that the woman giving the information today made a statement. She said that this rate better aligns with sustainability of the company's business.
Yes.
And I don't know whether that was a slip, but it sure kind of sounded good. Would you concur?
Oh, yeah, because anything that is more closely ties the build rates to the actual costs is and thus reflects in rates and more accurately what the company needs, is going to be in the company's long-term interest when you're looking at sustainability. It may not. There are probably some times where it will justify, where a rate like this will make people think that sort of rates should go up. Other times it will mean it should go down, but it essentially means that the rates are correlated with the actual needs of the company, as opposed to right now when you have the volumetric rates. The rates are more, because there's no real connection between the number of kilowatt hours you consumed and what the cost of the delivery was. Essentially, they're just wild ass guesses. Now, we've learned a lot of techniques for making those guesses fairly well, but they are still guesses. The other thing is that a volumetric rate doesn't send a useful signal to the user about what it is that they need to do to keep delivery costs down. If you have a demand-based rate, you as a consumer should be constantly thinking about things like, well, I don't want to be running my clothes dryer, my electric clothes dryer, at the same time as, say, I'm running my electric stove to cook a turkey. Okay, so I should wait till after I've finished cooking before I turn the dryer on. Or I don't want to be running a hair dryer at the same time as I'm cooking or charging my car or drying my clothes, because these large, the high demand appliances, it's okay if you run them in sequence, but you don't want them all running at the same time, right? So you can end up consuming precisely the same number of kilowatt hours by, say, running everything at the same time, or by running things sequentially, but your impact on the costs of the network are dramatically different if you run them all at the same time. So the demand-based rate not only gives you a better idea of how to allocate the rates, but it also gives to consumers a much better signal and much better sort of knowledge of how their behavior impacts the costs of providing them service. And that would also be something which I think, customers understanding better the cost, the impact of their actions on the grid is something that I think in general would probably be a benefit to the company and to help the company's sustainability by creating a more educated rate base.
Terrific,
Hopefully
Bob.
that made sense.
Yeah, it absolutely did. I love how when you make it reality, talking about hair dryers and stoves and stuff like that, then I really can understand it better. And hopefully, Orange and Rockland in their upcoming rate case will duplicate this for us. So, okay. So next, I think that
Before, could
Jackie.
I ask a question
Oh.
about the demand stuff first, or
Oh,
maybe?
yeah, absolutely, and then we can dovetail into your request for HERA rebates if anybody knows, and then Bill's on stack after you.
Bob, are they looking at using automated controls of different appliances? Or because I mean these kinds of rates have actually existed for decades and decades, and it has been possible for homeowners to sign on to demand-based rates in
Not in New
various
York State.
states. Various states, it's absolutely been possible. A lot of the Midwestern states had them, but the utility companies eventually did away with them because consumers, homeowners, absolutely do not have the mental time to be managing who's running this and who's running that, and so they would just quit and get off the rates. In practice it was a failure because while it's cool to think about, well, yeah, I shouldn't be running the hairdryer while I'm doing this or that, people aren't, they got households to run, they got families to raise, and they're, if the kids are turning appliances on, they can't be running around, running after him saying, oh no, don't turn the stove on, don't cook your breakfast, we have to wait till the this or that is going. So that's why they failed, because in practice it's not really possible for people to devote that mental energy to it. So I'm wondering if they have in mind that fact. Are they aware of why these rates have failed in other states for
Yes.
Okay.
Con Ed is aware of why they failed. I am as well. Both Con Ed and I believe, have extensive historical information about all of the various demand-based rates that existed when they went out of service, and what the ones that are still left. The important thing to understand here, from the point of a ground source heat pump or an air source heat pump user, is that while other behavioral changes other than using a heat pump may allow you to optimize your electric bill and get it even lower, the mere fact that you are using either an air source or a ground source heat pump will essentially increase your load factor to the point where you'll, as it says here, 80 to 90% of the time you will save money even without doing anything explicit to modify your behavior. Because remember, these estimates were made by simply looking at people's AMI data. There was no education here. These are not necessarily people who actually use SC4, R4. This is just looking at bills of people who are known to use air source heat pumps or who are known to have ground source heat pumps, not people who actually are on SC4. So the thing about the sort of the average home that has fossil fuel heat, etc., yes, those people, some of them will naturally have a usage pattern, which is high load factor. Others could, by going through a lot of careful management, they could increase their load factors to the point where they would get that benefit. But I think our primary interest in this group is ground source heat pump users, and ground source heat pump users will essentially will benefit from this rate with essentially no other behavioral changes. They do have the opportunity to benefit even more by being wise and putting some mental effort into it, but it is not necessary for them to do that. And on the subject of automatic control, ConEd is not actively doing anything there. I have argued in the past that if if we see a comeback of residential demand-based rates, they've been very rare in the past, but if we see a comeback in a significant area, that the heat pump manufacturers, for instance, should consider the rate structure in their device control systems. Right now, they spend a lot of time to optimize on kWh, in part because that's what COP measures, is kWh. They should also ideally be able to optimize not only kWh, but also kW, and kW in different time periods. And that is something which is entirely possible to do within the control software for these devices. The other optimization you would want to have would be things like, if you have a home that has a heat pump and an EV charger, it would be relatively simple, and I think it's been modeled out before. It wouldn't cause a serious timing problem, but essentially for the EV charger and for the heat pump to essentially negotiate with each other. With the heat pump saying stuff like, okay, I'll let you charge for the next, 20 minutes or something, but then I need it back because I've got to heat the house up. And essentially, if you had cooperation between the charger and the heat pump, interesting things could happen. Those are directions we should go in. We should have devices which optimize kW as well as kWh, but ConEd at the moment is not doing anything explicitly in that area.
Okay, thanks, Bob. Thanks, Jackie. Bill, you were on stack.
Yeah, and it fits just right because I wanted to respond to what Gene asked, but also in last week's Just In, we did run a brief on a splitter, which basically does what Bob is talking about, negotiate between appliances that are, heavy use appliances. The example they use is an electric heat pump dryer and an EV. You kind of put them both on this splitter, it'll only be working one at a time. But relative to Gene's question about having something written on this, I did put a link to the ConEd website where they talk about this pricing plan. I did send a message to them today. There's a couple of our installers that are interested in going back to all their customers and letting them know about this this rate plan, and I've asked if they've got any flyers or anything that they've produced on it. If you'd like the slide presentation that they showed today, a copy of that, or a copy of the report, I'd be happy to email it to whoever kind of puts their name in the chat. It'd be nice if there was something in between that kind of goes from the very technical end of the report and the very kind of populist piece that's on the website, but that's what we've got so far.
Thank you, Bill. And so the last thing we had on our list was to talk about the HERA rebates. And is there anybody here that's up on those that can answer Jackie's questions? I know, Jackie, that the BPCA, the Building Professional Contractors Association of New York, and Carol Lee Battaglia has been following that pretty closely. I don't know if you're connected with them. I can connect you if you send me a note.
That would be great.
Okay. And so that may wrap our meeting here, folks. 7 minutes early on a Friday.
Well, hey, John.
Yeah.
Can you give me a minute, because I'm going to put the link to the report in the chat. I just need to dig it out of the DMM.
Okay.
So if somebody wants the detailed report, hold on a moment here. I will put it in chat soon.
Bill, did you say that the recording today from ConEdison, there was a recording available?
No, I was referring to the slides.
Oh, okay. I thought I'm not gonna win any awards for mathematics or technical stuff, but I followed her pretty much at least halfway through in terms of what she was saying, and I thought that was good. Too bad it didn't get recorded. Okay. Final comments from anybody? Ron, what's our topic on your podcast?
So the next one coming out is actually about, it's really fascinating. It's a guy who does mediation between fossil fuel interest and people working in fossils and people working in clean energy and sustainability and trying to find common ground and stop us all from hating each other and wanting to kill each other. So I think it's kind of interesting. It should be out next week or so.
Okay, thank you. All right. So
Hey,
folks,
Bill, John, was that report, was it just sent to us or was it published? I can't find it in DMM.
I'm gonna punt to Bill on that one.
I thought it was a filed report. I'm suspecting that it was only sent to,
I got a
Party.
link to, I just put in the chat.
okay, good.
I got it from Alex.
Okay.
Yeah, I've seen it, but it's an email from fairly, a couple months back.
Right. It was in December, but
Yeah.
I maybe I'm just being blind, but I can't find it in DMM. If it's not there, we should ask them to publish it there. Anyway.
I agree. Okay, folks, next meeting 2 weeks is on schools and all this good stuff around schools. So I hope to see you then. Have a good weekend.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, John. Thanks,
Have a good
everybody.
weekend, everyone.
Take care, folks.